Let's check this out. This is there we go. This is a video that was compiled by the Recount, and it is basically gives you a timeline of where Donald Trump is at in terms of his, I guess, accepting the reality of COVID-19. And, you know, I think what is quite clear is that this is all very reflective of what Donald Trump was doing with the U.S. government. Apparently, they've iced CDC for whatever reason, because he's mad because there was leaks coming out of there, and they were telling the American public actually the truth about some of this stuff. And at one point, I think when Donald Trump is saying like this thing goes away, I think that's when Richard Burr from the Senate Intelligence Committee was meeting with some North Carolina donors and telling them like, oh, this is going to be as bad as the 1918 pandemic. And, you know, you may want to sell some stocks.
We have it totally under control. It's one person coming in from China.
We think we have it very well under control. We pretty much shut it down coming in from China.
You know, in April, supposedly it dies with the hotter weather. When it gets warm, historically, that has been able to kill the virus.
People are getting better. They're all getting better.
And the 15 within a couple of days is going to be down to close to zero.
It's going to disappear. One day, it's like a miracle. It will disappear.
And you'll be fine.
They're going to have vaccines, I think, relatively soon. Not only the vaccines, but the therapies. Therapies is sort of another word for cure.
You're talking about very small numbers in the United States. Our numbers are lower than just about anybody. It's really working out. And a lot of good things are going to happen. And we are responding with great speed and professionalism. It's going to go away.
Yeah, no, I don't take responsibility at all.
We're going to all be great. We're going to be so good. This came up, we came up so suddenly. This is a pandemic. I felt it was a pandemic long before it was called a pandemic. All you had to do is look at other countries.
The coronavirus, you know that, right? Coronavirus. And this is their new hoax. We're 15 people in this massive country. And because of the fact that we went early, we could have had a lot more than that. We're doing great. Our country is doing so great.
Yeah, there it is. I mean, that's what we're looking at. This is, I mean, I know a lot of you folks know this, but the American public needs to know it. And frankly, I don't think this is going to fully cut it, but maybe this inspires, I don't know, Joe Biden, the presumptive, nominee. Maybe it's a little early to call him that, but certainly they're acting like they are. Well, then they should act like they are. And they should get out there and they should be pushing Donald Trump, if not for the sake of the election in November, but for the sake of, the country. He's still putting out lies every day. So here is Richard Burr. He is trying to, in some way, justify the fact there was a piece by NPR, and I can't quite get this to move, I guess. There was a piece by NPR. We read it. I think we started off the show with it yesterday. And Burr responded to it by, of course, blaming the NPR. They wrote, in a tabloid-style hit piece today, NPR knowingly and irresponsibly represented a speech I gave last month about the coronavirus threat. And he said, let me set the record straight, he says here, trying to get this out so you can see him getting quite ratioed. This lunch was hosted on February 27th by the North Carolina State Society. It was publicly advertised and widely attended by donors. NPR knew but did not report that the attendees also included many non-members, bipartisan congressional staff, and representatives from the governor's office. Look, the idea that you're saying this in a non-televised way in a luncheon does not make it any better. You were not saying this to the American public. And it turns out, he goes on to say, every state has a state society. They aren't secretive or high dollar. He's changing the real issue here. They're great civic institutions that bring people in D.C. together for events, receptions, and lunches. And they're open to anyone who wants to get involved. Right, because people will take time off of their work to go and do it. Or is it just people who either are super rich and it's part of their job to go in and get information from the representatives they have paid for, or they get paid to go and get information and give information, like because they're lobbyists? Like most members of our Congress, I address our state society every year. That's a good thing. That's what we should be doing, meeting constituents and talking to them about the work. I wonder how many constituents were there that were not donors. How many constituents were there that were not donors? Where was this advertised? Give me a break. It's all about NPR's journalistic malpractice. Meanwhile, this was, of course, before people realized that Richard Burr was also divesting himself of stock based upon these briefings he was getting as the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Well, just a reminder, it was Richard Burr. It was Loeffler from Georgia. She's the appointed Georgian senator. And we should say her husband is like the CEO of the corporation that owns the New York Stock Exchange. Interesting. That would be an interesting string to tug on. We also have James Inhofe selling stocks around that time. We also have Ron Johnson. I don't know if we've heard from anywhere else. Burr's office also rebutted a ProPublica story indicating he sold between $500 and $1.6 million in stock in the weeks leading up to the market collapse. An aide said the sale happened before market volatility began. What? Is that supposed to be a defense? Is that supposed to be a defense? That's the whole point. That's not a defense. That's almost an admission of guilt. If he had sold during the market volatility, he would be like, wait a second, the market's not responding well to this. I'm going to sell. Give me a break. Man, these people should be kicked out. There should be hearings. And like I say, don't hold hearings. Just start lobbing accusations and make them come back with the justification. The Democrats are getting outplayed here again and again and again. And I would argue, like, I don't know. I'd be curious to see how many, how the mainstream media is covering this, how many seconds it lasts as a story, and frankly, independent media. Half the people on the left are, going to spend more time talking about the Democrats. And certainly if Dianne Feinstein or anybody else is involved in this, they should be booted too. But this is a Republican administration that is supposed to be handling this. And, it appears that the revolution is not going to happen. So it's rather important to take out Donald Trump. I hope people understand that at this point. God, there we go. Here is Tucker Carlson, who is out there really going after Richard Burr. Now, I should remind you that one of the reasons why they go after Richard Burr is because they've always hated this guy because he was heavily involved in, as far as they're concerned, he was a turncoat. This is someone post a Gateway Pundit headline. He was Richard Burr was a turncoat in impeachment at one point. But nevertheless, what Tucker Carlson is saying is correct. But, I mean, if Tucker Carlson's really interested, he should start digging around and see why we rejected a test weeks ago, months ago at this point, from the Germans.
She may have seen the news reports this afternoon. The chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee sold more than $1 million in stock in mid-February after learning how devastating the Chinese coronavirus could be. He had inside information about what could happen to our country, which is now happening, but he didn't warn the public. He didn't give a primetime address. He didn't go on television to sound the alarm. He didn't even disavow an op-ed he'd written just 10 days before claiming America was, quote, better prepared than ever for coronavirus. He didn't do any of those things. Instead, what did he do? He dumped his shares in hotel stocks so he wouldn't lose money. And then he stayed silent. Now, maybe there's an honest explanation for what he did. If there is, he should share it with the rest of us immediately. Otherwise, he must resign from the Senate and face prosecution for insider trading. There is no greater moral crime than betraying your country in a time of crisis. And that appears to be what happened. We'll have more on the story tomorrow.
I mean, he's right. And I think there's more. I think we got to do that now. Of course, I think Tucker's also excited to get Collins in Georgia, maybe. But we should be doing that also with Ron Johnson. We should be doing that with Inhofe. And we should be doing with any other senator. I don't care what party they're from. They should all go. They should all go. Next up. So here is Kelly Loeffler. She is the Republican Georgian senator who was appointed, and she, too, is responding to the fact that she sold a bunch of stock after these briefings. And this is the way that she is addressing this. When was this from? This was, this is from March 10th. So she knows that we're talking about a Spanish flu level pandemic. And on March 10th, 10, 12, 13 days at least after that, after she sold her stocks, this is what she was telling the American public.
I wanted to give you an update on the coronavirus situation following a meeting today that we had in the Senate with the President, the Vice President, and Secretary Mnuchin. They shared with us some ways that they are approaching this situation as it unfolds. First of all, I want to commend this administration, the President, the Vice President, for leading such a strong response. Everything from travel bans, travel advisories, to screening that's underway that has really slowed this spreading to America. We talked in the meeting today about some additional responses that the administration is looking to take to make sure that consumers are protected, that we have all the medical testing that we need, and that the economy stays strong. The good news is the consumer is strong, the economy is strong, jobs are growing. Our president has done a fantastic job making sure that we're in the best position to manage through this situation. It's really important that we all take responsibility for washing our hands. I know I'm a frequent hand washer. I wash my hands even more now. I even wipe down my cell phone. Just taking common sense protections. Thanks so much and have a great day.
That was only 10 days ago. And she knew better 10 days before that. I mean, that's stunning. What did they think was going to happen? What did they think was going to happen? And if they didn't think bad things were going to happen, why did they sell their stocks? It's nuts. Really nuts.